G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with part 2 of God Forbid the End is Nigh, Comparative Theology.
This one shall be in the field, and suddenly taken up, not present with the others in the field. Out of this has come the rapture doctrine, not out of the book of Revelation.
That's right. Revelation actually has nothing like a rapture, and it also doesn't have an antichrist. So it's later Christian traditions that have sort of collapsed a number of these ideas and terms. And it does make sense of some of the symbolism that if you've got this beast who opposes Christ, who is a lamb in the book of Revelation, so you've got a beast versus lamb dualism going on, it is a legitimate way to say this is a bit like the Antichrist. But Antichrist language we get in the little Johannine letters, 1, 2, and 3 John, and there it's used just to refer to very human opponents. This is anyone who speaks against Christ is an Antichrist. It's not some sort of cosmic devilish figure. But if we can go back to the rapture, I think the earliest reference to something like that is actually in Paul's First Thessalonians, where he talks about what will happen at the end of time, and those of us who are alive will be caught up or snatched up into the clouds. So it does seem to be early as Christianity is working itself out, and actually fades out, I think, as there's a second and third generation of Christ believers who have realised that, oh, maybe Jesus isn't coming back this week. Maybe we're going to have to wait a bit longer and figure out how to live as believers in a different kind of way.
So, Robin, do you believe the rapture is coming?
Not in the sense it's usually meant. The other thing to say here is that there was an enormously influential range of books called Left Behind, a whole series by Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins, who are two American evangelical scholars and preachers. Popular fiction, sort of pseudo-Christian fiction, if we can say that, was also made into a really bad movie in about the year 2000, good timing, starring Kirk Cameron.
Oh, that explains it.
Yeah, that's right. But it popularised this idea of faithful Christians, whenever this sort of final time came, would be snatched up. And it ties to premillennial dispensationalist views that faithful Christians are snatched up because then there's going to be a time of horrible tribulation and suffering, and so Christians are kind of rescued and the earth is left to its own devices. There's an argument to be made that that Left Behind series, it's sold millions of copies and has had a huge impact on American Christianity. So I think we see that impacting certain kinds of conservative Christians here in Australia, but it's not a prevalent biblical view. The much more dominant biblical view is that there is some kind of end of time, and the whole of humanity, both those raised from the dead and those still living, face their maker. And then there's a sort of giant sorting out. There's various manifestations of that. But the rapture is really a very minority strand in the tradition.
But is the distinction there? Because if there's going to be a mass sorting out, if the good are going to be separated from the evil, then there's going to be some judgment, and some people are going to get the wrong end of that stick for good reason, no?
Yeah, you could make that argument. I quite like the way the end is imagined in the book of Revelation. People read it and think it's such a horrible, violent, judgmental book, but actually the end is imagined as this mass resurrection, and people get to face God, and there right at the very end this sense that they have the option to still choose God. Some scholars have actually talked about there being universal salvation at the end of Revelation. And then God effectively recreates the world and brings heaven down to earth in this sort of paradise, where it's almost a return to Eden, but it's a garden city. So it's not quite the kind of heaven, hell, rapture, three-tiered universe that's normally imagined.
Hence, God forbid, we're with Dr. Robin Whittaker, with the Uniting Church, a coordinator of New Testament studies at the Pilgrim Theological College, senior lecturer at the University of Divinity, and Professor Gary Trumpf, Professor of the History of Ideas at the University of Sydney, founder of the Institute for Millennial and Apocalyptic Studies, with a research and teaching career spanning more than half a century. We'll look at his specialty, Melanesia, up next. This is a mind-boggling statistic. Of all the known describable religions that currently exist, 1/4 are in Melanesia, our immediate neighbourhood. From West Papua across to the Solomons, New Caledonia, Vanuatu and Western Fiji, you'll find the greatest concentration of languages and religions on Earth. And the world's leading expert with decades of field work in the area happens to be our own, God forbid, panellist Gary Trumpf. So, Gary, how is it possible that a quarter of the world's religions can be in this relatively tiny area to Australia's north and northeast?
Well, look, if I ever go to heaven, that'll be one of the first questions I would ask, because it is a real mystery. In the second largest island on Earth, Papua New Guinea, which includes, well, the Great New Guinea Island, so it includes the eastern provinces of Indonesia, now called Papua and West Papua, you have so many landlocked groups in mountain fortresses. So it can be explained in terms of isolation. So, for example, as I work on my book called The Great Valley of Time, about the Waigi Valley, where the first known garden seems to have been discovered at Cook.
This is in Papua New Guinea, a 10,000-year-old garden.
Yes, this is up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. This is a large religio-linguistic complex with many tribes that have fought one another for many years, and you can plot out by oral history who there first, who came last, and so it's a matter of working out from place to place what gives. I've been into the village of Nis, just out the back of the Teachers' College at Madang on the coast of New Guinea, and discovered there that Nis is companion to two other villages. That makes three in all, and they speak this very distinct language and no one else on Earth does. So there's your tiniest example.
And the unique language is linked to the unique religion?
Yes, because in this they have their own traditions, ways of expressing an understanding of gods, the ancestors, and so on.
What was it like when you encountered remote villages? Had some never had contact with Europeans before?
Well, this could bring up the millenarian question, because one of the most electrifying moments in my life was to meet a Fuyugi man way out in the mountains. It really took my breath away walking to get him, and I was told he'd never met a white person in his life. And he was very scared to meet me, because he'd been taught by the leader of the new religious movement that if he talked to a white, the whole universe would come to an end. There'd be earthquakes, there'd be a landslide, taking irrecognizable mountains away. So we didn't really get much of a conversation going. My Fuyugi was not that good. And then we you start off and you were right, and he wasn't too sure how to answer that question because of the nervousness for him of the situation. But you have to understand that with the coming of the outsiders, particularly the missionaries, who will teach about end times, then these ideas will be grafted into many traditions that don't have any such ideas.
So what are some examples of this?
Well, for example, at your island, when I was looking at some old notebooks from the missionaries, there was in French a discussion about the common belief among the Mikio and the Ruro people that the ancestors would come at some point and bring great gifts that came out of the spirit world. So you can see that talk about the coming of the kingdom of God taught by the missionaries is like a literal gift from the ancestors in a new and special way. But then when the new items brought in by the whites get thought about, they're so miraculous. I mean, here we have Stone Age or lithic cultures meeting humanity at its high-tech moment, steel-bellied ships coming in, depositing tins everywhere, all sorts of things like knives and forks, radios. This all gets talked about as the cargo.
And this is cargo cults we're talking about.
Yes. So there'll be these moments where the groups will say, well, this cargo, well, it belongs to us. Why is it always going to the whites?
And because the interesting thing is, the perception is that God didn't send the white man, the gods sent the cargo. It just happened to be that white men were with the cargo. Is that the idea?
Well, it's interesting.
And the cargo's magic.
Yes. Let me give you an example. Once on a wharf, an Oro man, that's up on the northern provincial side of the Papuan mainland, he saw written on a box, SOAP, which is soap. But having learned some English, he realised that this was his own tribe's name, SOAP. And he said, oh, this is for us, just to give you an example. But no, it went away to the missionary's house, and it didn't ever come to the people. So, in a nutshell, this is the problematic, the psychology of the cargo cult. The newcomers, some of whom boss us around very badly, particularly the secular types like the patrol officers, or these days, people who want to set up mines, they get all these goods, and the common people don't. So then there's a transference of collective hope that a magical moment will come and rectify everything. See, this is a solution, a comforting solution of rectification. We can't always say that it's like the millennium in a big bang unless the prophet who's getting the people together says, yes, Jesus is coming with the ancestors and they will return together and they'll bring us the cargo. Then it's looking very much like a millenarian movement, not just a cargo cult episode.
Gary, how do you explain this? Are we seeing with the cargo cults effectively the development of a new religion, or is it an adaptation of some traditional beliefs with the influence of missionaries? From a sort of development or evolution of religion point of view, how would you frame that?
Some of these movements that are of a millenarian kind you find in the Waiagi Valley don't have the cargo involved. So for one episode, a man hearing about the story of the flood in the Bible said, quickly, come to my village where I built a palisade in which people will be saved from the next flood. And if you all come across, we've got food and everything available for it to look after you because that moment is about to arrive. And there's no talk about the cargo. And in this case, it's kind of an idea from the Bible that becomes important in this man's mind, so he starts a movement. I mean, of course, the idea of floods, or a great flood, that's a worldwide mythological phenomenon as well. So there could be a bit of eclecticism here. But further down the valley, there was a man who said, look, if we're going to get the cargo, we have to put on a giant feast like we always have for fertility. Big kill ceremony, but this time the object of the big kill would be to encourage the ancestors to bring the new goods, especially guns, which will come up from inside a lake not far from the Sing Sing ground.
The ancestor gods would bring the guns, not the white man.
Exactly.
So tell me about the John Frum cargo cult.
Right, well, this is in the southernmost main island of Vanuatu, so it's a long way from the heartlands of Papua New Guinea on Tana Island. So you can see, people dressed up in mimicked military uniforms. They carry imitation guns, and they march up and down the village a number of times during the day, and they'll tell you they're waiting for John Frum, a mythic figure who is, I suppose, lost in the mists of times as like an archetypal ancestor who was conceived to bring the cargo that the missionaries and the patrol officers had, but in these more recent times has connected himself to the royal family of Britain.
He may have been a real person, a colonialist, but no one's quite sure.
Could be, or he could be a mythic figure within the Tanese tradition itself.
And Tanese villagers expected him to arrive by plane, as the colonialists and missionaries did, and they cleared runways and built planes out of bamboo and even aircraft traffic control control towers, fake ones out of bamboo?
True, true. Only some of the tennies, by the way, we can't generalise. So cargo cultism, it happens in pockets.
And it can happen very quickly?
Yes.
Both the religion rising or the cult rising and also dying?
Yes, very quickly.
Okay, back immediately.